You probably ain't got a clue as to what I'm talking about, but have you ever thought about patterns? Yeah, patterns. Things that repeat and repeat significantly in our daily life, nature, and even in human design, such as art and architecture. Our lives are full of patterns. I mean, holy shit. Nature regulates us like little bitches. We eat, we sleep, we urinate, and yeah, you get the picture. Then, too, we have patterns of work, social activity, and fun time for making like YouTube videos. And no one can deny that our existence is full of patterns. So much so, I think patterns are weird and perhaps not made of this reality, and I don't have a clue as to what I mean by that. But I do know what I mean when I say, as above, so below. And that just means that patterns, especially big patterns, are repeated on a smaller scale. For instance, why do electrons and neutrons orbit the nucleus, just like the moon orbits the Earth? Then there's math. Yeah, math. You know this, there's a shitload of patterns in numbers. So it isn't only logical that human creativity creates a lot of shit with patterns, because from music and math to buildings, patterns are a real thing, and all of us are regulated by patterns. And those fucking patterns, like I said, are everywhere. And of course, we have patterns in nature, from spirals to fractals, with spots and stripes thrown in. Look at a leaf and you'll be in awe of the patterns you'll find in nature and again in our lives. But why? Why is that? Is it some insidious alien attempt to confine and regulate the human species? Okay, I'm just making that shit up. But there are answers, and they ain't easy for an old man like me, and I'll try to keep it somewhat simple. First and foremost, we look for patterns everywhere, because it's a basic evolutionary cognitive skill. In our understanding of patterns, we seek order. What is chaos? Our understanding of patterns hone our understanding of the world that we actually exist in, which is simply saying that we use patterns to make sense of the world, because we live in a senseless world. But the world isn't senseless. Not really, because patterns exist without humans, in nature, and they exist in nature just like they do in our minds, to bring order to a world that without patterns would be a natural existence of chaos. So let's now ask ourselves, why do patterns happen in the natural world? And yeah, there is an answer, a long-winded answer that covers everything from the laws of physics to the chemical processes, along with the survival of the fittest, as well as having a lot to do with efficiency, and I added efficiency in myself because that just makes sense, at least to me. Anyways, bottom line as to why patterns occur, yeah, the human brain is wired to see patterns, but patterns, they exist outside our perception as a reality on their own. Although I don't know how anyone would know that truth unless they were there to see for themselves, and that makes no sense, and I'm just going to move on to how many kinds of patterns are there. Yeah, and there's 9 of them, and some of them we both know, like spirals, and no doubt you might have heard of fractals. Then there's cracks, patterns that are caused by stress, like mud drying. Waves, too, are a pattern, from waves in the desert sand to ocean waters. And if you enjoy a bubble bath every now and again, all those bubbles are patterns that fall into the foam category. A sponge with its structure is another example of a foam pattern. And there's a couple others out there: stripes, spots, honeycombs, and curves. And with that, I think I've covered all the patterns in nature. So now it's time to talk about the patterns in our lives. And I'm not talking about eating, sleeping, breathing, and those patterns we all know about. I'm going to take a bit and talk about the patterns we don't see and the ones we are totally unaware of. And there's a shitload of them, from behavior patterns to social patterns to cognitive patterns. Each have their own category. And now I'm thinking, what? Who comes up with all this shit? For instance, psychological patterns, seeing patterns in clouds or interpreting information so it fits your belief. Yeah, there's a lot of that shit going on these days. There are also behavior patterns, and a couple examples would be speech patterns, body language, shit like driving or riding a bike, and last are social or biological patterns, like facial expressions, tone of voice, personal space, and like I said, biological patterns for sleep, food, and yeah, sex. Now, I'm going to close this video with a pattern of my very own, the closing pattern, and all that's left to say is that if one would like to move beyond this reality and start seeing shit in a different light, maybe we have to find a way to look beyond the patterns. And that video might be, and I'm not sure, but it might be down the road, and that kind of fits my pattern of how I do things. Just so you know, the further I got into this video, the stranger and weirder it got. Patterns. You know, who would have thunk? I just started the video with the thought about all the patterns that we find in nature. And then it just evolved into patterns of human behavior, as above, so below, and patterns in math and music. And patterns are everywhere. They really are, I think. Designed by aliens somewhere. Well, okay, I don't know what I mean by that, and I touch on that in the video. I mean, there's just too many patterns. It's too involved and it's too intertwined with who we are as a species, too intertwined with reality, that when you start looking at all the patterns, man, there almost has to be some kind of driving force behind it. Otherwise, there would just be fucking chaos, right? And if you want to make sense out of chaos, that has to begin with patterns. But man, there's just not natural patterns in nature. There's human behavior, or patterns in behavior, and it's just like I said. It's and this is one of those videos that I did that I'm just gonna have to think about it for a long time to come, because there's a lot of odd shit when it comes to the patterns in our lives. There's a lot more than just going to the bathroom on a regular basis, I tell you that. And with that, my friends, enjoy. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the patterns in, well, maybe your life. That one went down a lot better than the last one did. Out of here. Love you. Peace out.